Ida for feeling betrayed after my wife hid that she could never have kids until years into our marriage? When I met her, it felt as though the universe had conspired to bring us together at precisely the right moment. I had been through relationships before, some short-lived, others more serious, but none had ever evoked the certainty that coursed through me when I first saw her. She had a way about her, an effortless charm woven into every movement, every glance, every half-smile that made it seem like she already knew some secret about the world the rest of us were just struggling to uncover. From the very first conversation, it was as if we had known each other forever, like two souls that had been waiting, wandering separately, until they finally collided at the perfect time. She laughed at my jokes, really laughed, not the polite, obligatory kind, but with the kind of abandon that made me want to say something even funnier, just to hear it again. Our humor aligned like a synchronized dance, effortless, unforced. The way we saw the world, the things we found amusing, the little absurdities of life, she got it. And I got her. There was an unspoken ease between us, a fluidity in conversation, as though every thought I had led seamlessly into one of hers, and every dream she shared was one I had already imagined for myself. It felt as if we were sketching out the same future, filling in the lines of an unwritten story together. I remember those early days vividly. The electric energy of new love, the quiet anticipation of seeing her again after a long day apart, the way time seemed to collapse whenever we were together. She was full of life, curious about everything, eager to share her world with me. We spent hours talking about the things that mattered, our ambitions, our fears, our hopes for what the next 10, 20, 50 years would look like. She listened intently when I spoke about my dreams of having a family, my excitement about the idea of raising children, teaching them about the world, shaping them into good, kind people. It wasn't just idle talk for me. It was a vision I had carried for as long as I could remember, a future I had always assumed would be part of my life. She never once hesitated. Never once flinched. She would nod along, eyes warm, sometimes adding little musings about what kind of mother she thought she'd be. Thoughtful, patient, the kind who would sneak handwritten notes into lunchboxes, who would let our kids stay up a little past bedtime on weekends because she remembered how magical that felt as a child. I could see it so clearly, the quiet Sunday mornings with tiny feet padding across the floor, the birthday parties filled with laughter and messy cake-covered fingers, the late-night talks with a teenage son or daughter navigating the complexities of growing up. And in every version of that future, she was right there beside me. I had no reason to doubt her sincerity. Everything she said, every reaction, every little detail she added to the picture we were painting together reinforced the idea that we wanted the same things. That we were moving toward the same destination, hand in hand, eyes fixed on a shared horizon. When I finally worked up the nerve to propose, there was no doubt in my mind. She was the one. The only one. I spent weeks planning, agonizing over how to make it perfect, but in the end, it didn't matter. The moment she said yes, the world tilted back into alignment, and nothing else mattered. Our wedding day was everything I had hoped it would be. Standing at the altar, watching her walk toward me, I felt the weight of 1,000 possibilities settling into place, crystallizing into one perfect moment. Every promise we made felt unshakable, rooted in a love so deep I never imagined anything could threaten it. We had built something real, something strong, something meant to last a lifetime. And so, I stepped forward into that future, confident that we were building it together. Confident that the life we had imagined was just beginning. Confident that every dream we had whispered to each other in the quiet of the night was real, solid, waiting just over the horizon. I never saw the storm coming. The years following our wedding were a dream. At least, that's what I told myself. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm, filled with shared routines, lazy Sunday mornings wrapped in soft light, the quiet intimacy of whispered conversations just before sleep. We traveled, built traditions, spent holidays wrapped in the warmth of each other's presence. There was a feeling of permanence, of something solid and enduring, as though we had stepped into the future we had always envisioned, and it was unfolding exactly as it should. I never doubted her. Never questioned whether we were still walking toward the same destination. For the longest time, it felt as though we had all the time in the world. The idea of children remained a soft, distant promise, something we would get to when the time was right. We spoke about it in the abstract, like a painting still waiting to be filled in. One day, we would say, with an easy certainty that made it feel inevitable. Then, as we neared our mid-30s, one day started to feel less like an open-ended promise and more like something we needed to act on. The conversations became more real, more immediate. The passing years whispered a quiet warning: if we wanted a family, we couldn't keep pushing it to the horizon. The time was now. I remember the first time I brought it up in earnest, expecting excitement, maybe even relief that we were finally ready to take that next step. Instead, something flickered across her face so quick, so fleeting that I almost missed it. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't even hesitation. It was fear. A kind of quiet, guarded panic. She recovered quickly, nodding, smiling, saying all the right things. But something was off. A sliver of unease wormed its way into my mind, though I ignored it. She was just nervous, I told myself. It was a big step. Of course, she'd be a little apprehensive. But then, the deflections began. First, subtle excuses that felt reasonable. Let's wait until after the holidays. Let's focus on work a little longer. Let's just enjoy this time, just the two of us, before things change. I agreed, not wanting to pressure her. I had always envisioned us as a team, making these decisions together. If she needed more time, I would give it to her. But the delays continued. Months passed, then a year. Every time I tried to revisit the conversation, she would find a way to steer it in a different direction. And still, that feeling of something unspoken, something hidden, gnawed at me. I started to press harder, less willing to accept vague reassurances. I needed something concrete. A plan. A real commitment that we were moving forward. Then, one night, it happened. We were sitting in the dim glow of our living room, a half-finished bottle of wine between us. The conversation started the same as always, gentle, careful. But this time, I wasn't backing down. I told her we couldn't keep putting it off. I told her that if something was wrong, if she had changed her mind, I needed to know. I told her I couldn't build my life around a dream that was never going to happen. And then, she went quiet. Not the kind of silence that comes with thinking, with searching for the right words. No, this was something else. A silence that felt heavy, like the air itself had thickened around us. My stomach tightened. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. She had known all along. Not since last year. Not since we got married. Not since we started seriously talking about kids. No, she had known since before we ever met that she could never have children. It wasn't a matter of difficulty, or of slim chances, or of hope. It was impossible. I stared at her, my mind struggling to make sense of the words she had just spoken. My world tilted, and for a moment, everything felt unreal, like I had stepped into some distorted version of my own life. She knew. She knew from the beginning. From the very first time I had told her how much I wanted to be a father. From every conversation where I had poured my heart out about the future I had envisioned. From every late-night talk where I had shared my excitement, my anticipation, my dreams. And she had said nothing. She had let me believe, let me build my life around something that was never going to happen. And she had done it knowing that, for me, this was never something I saw as optional. I felt sick. Betrayal crawled through me, cold and suffocating. My mind raced, grasping at explanations, searching for some piece of information that would make this make sense. But there was nothing. Just the stark, unbearable truth. When I asked her why, she didn't hesitate. She had been afraid. Afraid that if she told me the truth, I would leave. Afraid that I wouldn't choose her if I knew. Afraid that the life we had built together wouldn't exist if she had been honest. So she had hoped. Hoped that by the time we reached this moment, I would love her enough that it wouldn't matter. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to yell, to demand answers, to make her understand the depth of what she had taken from me. But all I felt was hollow. Empty. Because it wasn't just about children. It wasn't just about the family I would never have. It was about trust. It was about the foundation of our marriage, the very thing I had believed was unshakable. And now, that foundation was crumbling beneath me. I looked at her, the woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted with my entire future, and I no longer recognized her. I no longer knew if the person sitting in front of me was the same person I had promised forever to. And worst of all, I no longer knew if I could ever forgive her. I sat there, frozen in place, as the weight of her words pressed down on me, suffocating and inescapable. My mind raced, grasping for some way to process what she had just admitted, but every thought led to the same inescapable conclusion: she had stolen my choice. She had taken something sacred, something fundamental, and buried it beneath a carefully woven tapestry of deception. The woman I had built my life around, the woman I had trusted more than anyone, had spent the past decade hiding a truth so monumental that it shattered everything I thought I knew about us. A dull ringing filled my ears, drowning out the sound of her voice as she tried to explain, to justify, to defend the indefensible. I caught fragments. I was afraid. I couldn't bear to lose you. I kept hoping, but they were just words, meaningless syllables tumbling into the void between us. Nothing she could say would change the reality of what she had done. I closed my eyes, trying to summon some shred of understanding, but all I felt was the slow, crushing weight of betrayal. I had never been the kind of person who demanded perfection from those I loved. I knew people made mistakes. I knew fear could push someone into doing things they never intended. But this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a lapse in judgment. It was a conscious, deliberate deception that had stretched across years, carefully maintained with every nod, every knowing smile, every false promise of a shared future that had never truly existed. When I finally spoke, my voice didn't sound like my own. It was quieter, steadier than I expected, but it carried a sharpness that made her flinch. "You let me believe," I said, the words slow and deliberate. "For 10 years. You let me plan my life around something that was never real." She shook her head, her eyes glistening with tears. "It was real," she whispered. "Our love was real. Everything we built was real. I didn't know how to tell you. I thought maybe you'd change your mind. That we'd be enough for each other." A bitter laugh escaped me, sharp and unbidden. "Enough? How could we be enough when you never even gave me the chance to decide for myself? When you knew, from the very beginning, that this was something I needed, something I dreamed about, and you chose to keep it from me." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away, the movement instinctive. Her face crumpled at the rejection, and for a moment, I saw a flash of something raw, something desperate. But I couldn't bring myself to offer her comfort. Not now. Not when the ground beneath me had turned to sand. I stood, needing space, needing air, but no matter how far I moved, I couldn't escape the crushing reality of what she had done. I paced the room, my mind churning, the memories of the past decade unraveling and rearranging themselves into something unrecognizable. Every conversation, every moment of intimacy, every whispered dream of the future, it was all tainted now, colored by the knowledge that she had known all along and had chosen silence. Had she ever planned to tell me? Or had she truly believed she could outrun the truth forever? That love would be enough to smother the inevitable reckoning? I thought back to all the times I had spoken about fatherhood, the excitement in my voice, the way I had imagined our future together. The times she had smiled and nodded, feeding me the illusion of agreement. Was she always waiting for the right moment to confess? Or was she hoping that, by the time I found out, I would be so deep in love, so entangled in the life we had built, that I would have no choice but to accept it? I turned back to her, my voice quiet but cutting. Did you ever love me? Or was I just a dream you didn't want to lose, no matter what it cost? Her breath hitched, her shoulders shaking as fresh tears fell down her cheeks. Of course, I loved you, she choked out. I love you more than anything. I shook my head, my chest tightening. Then why didn't you trust me with the truth? Why didn't you believe I deserved to know? Silence stretched between us, heavy and unyielding. And in that silence, I understood something terrible, something irreversible. She hadn't just taken away my ability to choose. She had taken away the trust that formed the foundation of everything we had built. And no matter how much I had loved her, no matter how deeply I still wanted to hold on to the life we had created, I couldn't ignore the gaping wound she had left in its place. Love had never been the problem. But love wasn't enough to fix this. I turned away, my hands trembling at my sides, my mind screaming with the impossible question of what came next. Because for the first time since the day I met her, I didn't know if we had a future left to salvage. The days that followed felt like a waking nightmare. The world outside continued on as if nothing had changed, but inside, within the walls of our home, everything had shifted. I moved through life as if submerged in water, slow, heavy, each thought thick with betrayal. The woman I had built my life with, the woman I had trusted above all else, was now a stranger. She still looked the same, still carried the same familiar scent, still moved through our shared space with the same grace that had once captivated me. But she was different. Or maybe I was. Maybe it was the knowledge of what she had done, of what she had withheld, that made her unrecognizable. I couldn't escape it. Every time I looked at her, I saw a lie stretching back over the years, woven into every memory I once cherished. Our first date, when I had excitedly mentioned my dreams of having children, not knowing that she already knew it was impossible. The time we had visited friends with their newborn, when I had held the tiny, wriggling body in my arms and whispered, one day. The nights we had spent talking about baby names, about how we would decorate a nursery, about what traits we hoped our children would inherit. Had she ever felt guilt? Had she ever looked at me during those moments and thought about telling me the truth? Or had she simply buried it deeper, convincing herself that love would be enough, that I would bend, that I would accept whatever reality she had chosen for me? I felt trapped inside my own life. If I left, I would be the villain, the man who walked away from his wife because she couldn't give him children. The man who let biology outweigh love. The kind of person I had never thought myself capable of being. And yet, staying felt impossible too. How could I wake up next to someone who had robbed me of my future? How could I rebuild a life with someone who had built our foundation on deception? She tried, at first, to pretend things were normal. She would move closer to me at night, place her hand on my arm, rest her head against my shoulder the way she used to. But I remained stiff, unmoving, unresponsive. Eventually, the attempts stopped. The silence stretched between us, growing wider, deeper, until we were nothing more than two people coexisting in the same space, separated by an invisible, insurmountable distance. Then, one evening, she finally spoke. I don't want to lose you. Her voice was small, fragile, as if saying the words aloud would shatter her entirely. Please, tell me what I can do to fix this. I wanted to answer. I wanted to believe that there was something, anything that could undo the damage. But there wasn't. There was no fixing what she had done. No erasing the years of deceit. No way to make me unknow the truth. I don't think you can, I said, and the words felt like lead in my mouth. She crumpled, her breath hitching, but I had no comfort left to offer. I had spent the last of my patience, the last of my understanding, the last of my love trying to reconcile what she had done with the person I thought she was. And I couldn't. We started sleeping in separate rooms after that. It wasn't a discussion, just a quiet understanding that had settled between us. She cried herself to sleep at night. I heard her through the walls, muffled sobs that once would have broken me, that once would have sent me rushing to comfort her. But I stayed where I was, staring at the ceiling, feeling nothing. The hardest part was knowing that I still loved her. Even now, even after everything, there was still a part of me that ached at the thought of losing her. But it was not enough. Love wasn't enough. Not when trust had been shattered beyond repair. It took me another 2 weeks to make my decision. 2 weeks of sleepless nights. 2 weeks of running my fingers over the wedding band on my hand, feeling its weight, its meaning, its emptiness. 2 weeks of imagining a future with her, a future without her, a future that had never been real to begin with. One morning, as the sun was just beginning to rise, I packed a bag. She woke up as I was zipping it shut, sitting up in bed with a look of sleepy confusion that quickly turned to horror as she realized what was happening. "No," she whispered. "Please, no." I couldn't meet her eyes. If I did, I might falter. I might stay. And I knew, deep down, that I couldn't. "I can't do this," I said, voice hollow. "I can't pretend that this didn't happen. That it doesn't change everything." Her breath came out in a sharp, broken sob. "But I love you. I loved you too." My voice cracked on the words. "But love isn't supposed to feel like this." She begged me to stay. She pleaded through her tears, grasping at my hands, my shirt, anything that could tether me to the life she had built on deception. But I had spent years walking a path that had never been mine to choose. And now, I was choosing. I left. I don't remember much of that first drive. Just the hum of the road beneath me, the weight of the silence pressing in on me. I pulled over once, somewhere far enough from home that it no longer felt like mine, and I sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel, trying to catch my breath. I thought I would feel relief. That leaving would feel like freedom. But it didn't. It felt like grief. It felt like losing something I had spent a decade building. But beneath the ache, beneath the sorrow, there was something else. Clarity. I had been living in a dream that was never real. And for the first time in years, I was waking up. I didn't know what my future looked like anymore. The vision I had carried with me for so long was gone, burned away by the truth. But as I sat there, staring out at a horizon that held nothing but possibility, I realized something. At least now, I had the chance to build something real. And this time, it would be built on truth.